Good afternoon. I'm the last guy between you and the lunch. I was just talking to him and I said I'll keep it for around 15 minutes. We'll keep it pretty brief. I'm sure, how many of you are swimmers out here? That's the reason I'm asking this question is very relevant to what we're going to be discussing. The reason I'm asking this question is, whenever I talk or when my team talks and we talk to organizations, large enterprises, CISOs, CIOs, not just in India, globally, they all want to learn how to swim after they are about to drown. It goes back again to the same thing, right? And I was just talking to one of the lawyers, Biju out here, I'm not sure he's here. We were just having a quick discussion about SBOM, the software bill of material. That's something which I used to work way back in 2012 when the concept was pretty new to organizations, right? And that got us into thinking about why organizations are taking so much of time to be able to understand the importance of a software bill of material. I'll give you a very simple, small example. How many of you go shopping? I mean, we all go to the departmental store, right? Do you know what is impulse shopping? Right? I'm talking to you with relevance to API security. I'm talking to you in relevance with an SBOM or an API SBOM because there's a lot of relevance. How many of you do impulse buying in terms of at the counter? You pick up a lot of stuff you don't need and you go back home, right? If it's a guy, the wife will scold you back. If it's a lady, the husband will scold you back. Why are you spending so much money on unnecessary items? That's what happens technically and practically when we are talking about an SBOM or an API SBOM. We just pick up things. We don't even realize whether we need it. Why do we need it? Oh, my best friend was using it in Target. Oh, my best friend is using it in AT&T. So I'm using it. Do we need it? That's the important thing, right? And before even realizing it, you're in a legal soup or you are already compromised. So Rapify, as the name suggests, we are a pure Indian startup. We do not have anything which is taking something from Git and trying to create on top of it. So the entire intellectual property belongs to us. It's not something where we are building on somebody else's proprietary technology. So most of our products are right now being patented and trademarked. Our technology is being patented because of the fact we are spending a lot of time and effort. And we spend more than 90% of our profits, right, on only R&D. Unlike a startup, I was just talking to my teams. As a startup, we have a method to ensure that our APIs consumed within the organizations, our SBOM within the applications are all documented and verified. So Rapifuzz, the name is typically real-time. It was supposed to be our first product, which was API Fuzzer, which we introduced in the market in 2021. It was real-time API fuzzing. We got a client called Singapore government and they said, we also want to do SOAP. Initially it was RESTful, right? He said SOAP. I said SOAP was like a half an hour, 45-minute task. We introduced SOAP for Singapore government and we said, okay, we won't change the name. We said real-time API fuzzing. And suddenly, to solve our own problems, we started creating some more products and we said, we spent the time in branding the company, so we don't rename the company, we rename the product. So we renamed our product and API security to API Fuzzer. And making security simple is something which is trademarked. We've got it copyrighted because of the fact that this is what we want to do. Every single aspect what we do is to make it easy. How many of you are aware of SBOMs, software bill of material? So I'm not going to be looking at my presentation just to give you an idea and to tell you about what's the difference. When we talk about an API, when we talk about an SBOM or software bill of material, it's exactly whatever components are going inside. You are using Android iPhones. Have you ever seen the About Us? They declare all the open source components which are being consumed by the vendor, right, in your phone. That's a simple bill of material. Apart from that, the metadata we take into account in the software bill of material is relevant to what are the third-party libraries, what are the licensing risks we are talking about. Licensing means, are we taking a GPL license, are we doing an AGPL license? Everybody thinks open source, freeware, and open source is the same thing, right? So there's a huge difference between freeware versus open source. So you've got to look at the licensing and legal terms which get introduced into the SBOM area. So there's a limitation on the SBOM. SBOM is only supposed to help you create your inventory of your application which you're consuming, right? Vis-a-vis, when we talk about an API SBOM, we are talking about a lot of metadata which is unnoticed, which we dare not to talk about, right? One of the major important things there with the API SBOM is, I have an application, let's say target is an application, right? And the target application, right? You may have a list of hundreds of APIs. The biggest challenge which organizations face during that inventory of APIs is how many APIs do I have in my production? I'll give you a very live use case. We're talking to a very large bank in India, and the CISO was the CTO, the infrastructure head 6 months ago. And he comes out with a story and says, Mr. Rampal, I have one question if you can help me solve. I said, what's the question? He says, when I talk as the infrastructure head, I knew exactly I had 375 APIs in my application. Now as a CISO, my security team only tests 200 APIs, right? And my development team for the same product says only 120 APIs. What do I believe? Isn't that a trust problem around? That's another problem on the API SBOM. I would like to know exactly what is being consumed within my API, within my application there. Another thing developers forget to mention, right, or they don't do. Version control. You take out an application, it's there, right? And luckily this lady is working as a developer, and now she's wanting to do some testing on the UAT stage. So by mistake, she leaves across an API. Why? Because once it's on the UAT, I'd like to see some reports. Now that UAT environment has an API which has the admin authentication controls for the creator of the product, the god, right? I call them as gods, right? And what happens in that story, right? Somebody, her friend, just picks it up, leaves the company, goes outside and accesses, and you've actually broken the authentication layer. Why? Because you already have the username, password. You don't know exactly when the API is going to be called, right? Now, your gateways will never tell you the entire inventory of your applications. Why? Because these are hidden APIs. They are zombie, as you call them, right? Nobody comes to know about them. There's no versioning. Why? Because the version in your dev versus the version in your QA versus the version in your production environment have not been documented. We say version 1.1, but we need to look into the version of each and every endpoint. Another important problem statement is the API supply chain, which is important. Developers come and go, right? I was just talking to my team when we were just looking at our internal infrastructure when we create our products. We're just introducing a new concept. That is, we are telling each one of our developers not just to create my Swagger or GraphQL file. That's good. That's your part of your KRA. I always tell my team, when it hits your pocket, people work. It's a very standard philosophy, not just in India, everywhere. So we made it as a point that every time you write a new API, the business analyst or the BA has to define the problem statement it's going to solve, right? Which is verified by the user, which is the sales guys like us, right? And which means the developer has to implement a technical technical documentation for your SRS, right? So we are ensuring that we comply with those entire details, which means we're looking at the name of the API, the version, the problem statement we are talking about, which components, where all is that API going to be used, right? And what are the methods which the API is going to be allowed to be used under what access control. So it goes back to role-based access control. That's a business logic problem, right? So you got to solve that problem too when we are talking about an API SBOM. So when we're talking about the API SBOM, it's a new concept. People are still talking about it globally in the market. We've been working on it for the last 13 months. Our first version comes out with an API SBOM. So we are documenting every single API which is being there. A question which was asked by one of the people outside was, I have a gateway, is that sufficient? So the intention is one method, it's like statistics of grade 8, class 8, right? When we say, if we take the sample data and we say out of these 37 or 45 people, 28, let's say 40 of them are vegetarian and 5 are non-vegetarian. Can we say the Indian population is 5 out of 45, 1/9 of the Indian population is non-vegetarian? No, that's a very bad statistic. So the more the methods of ingression of your APIs within a gateway are introduced, you'll have a better coverage. Like I said, zombie APIs, undiscovered APIs, undocumented APIs will slip through always. So you need to have a very solid method to ingress APIs, which means I'm creating an API SBOM. We are also looking at the versioning. Every API, technically speaking, if you look at all the best books, on GraphQL or SOAP or REST APIs or JSON RPC, XML RPC, and all the structures, all of them do mention a version number for each and every API being consumed. It's important for us to look at that API metadata. We're also looking at, the list of custom APIs, commercial APIs, right? Some of the questions asked is, how many of you have ever tested a Google Map API in your life? you know what, there's a legal guy, he can sue you. Technically, you're not supposed to touch that API because that's an intellectual property belonging to Google, right? So, as a product, you are not supposed to, you should not be testing a third-party API which is not your own API. So, it's important for your inventory to be having a message of what are the list of my custom APIs, commercial APIs, right? Why do you need that information? Is because you should know exactly if you're talking to a third party and you're getting information. It's like when we implement Aadhaar authentication within our system, right? We are using the Aadhaar API as a bank. We have got lots of folks from NatWest right out here. They may be calling the Aadhaar API into it for verification of the user, right? Now, there's a limitation of what information comes. That's important to know exactly what's your custom and commercial APIs. We're also looking at the licensing terms. There is a term and condition of usage for commercial APIs. It tells you exactly what you can, what you can't do. 99% I can guarantee in this room don't even know there are terms for using those APIs. It's important to know those licensing terms because in case you're misusing them and there's an attack which is happening through your application, the first organization to be sued is yours, right? And the first person who is going to be is the chief risk officer, acts the head. That's what happens technically in the market, right? We're looking at vulnerabilities, right? I am sure anybody, would everybody in the in this room know the difference between a CVE and a CWE? It's a security term. One is a common vulnerability and the second is a common weakness. Vulnerability only comes when it's proclaimed, right? So for example, you've got a CVE number 2024///, right? Now there's a vulnerability of, let's say, a Cisco router. That same vulnerability, because they're using a third-party open source library, could occur in a Juniper and blah, 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 right? So that's a vulnerability which is specific to it. A weakness means, let's say, for example, we know some people in this room have diabetes, right? And we know we should not give them sugar or starch, right? That's a weakness we inherit in our body. So the moment I give you sugar or starch, what's going to happen? You're going to have a panic attack, you know, whatever the symptoms of a diabetes are like, right? So typically, that's what goes into a weakness enumeration, right? Which means your application could suffer this particular weakness, right? Just to give you a very layman example, we got these lights. All these lights are controlled through a master, which is the administrator, right? We call these lights as objects. Just giving a simple example of a vulnerability, right? These are all objects, right? Now, that object is controlled, let's say, by Naresh, right? I managed to get hold of Naresh's phone, right? Because that's secured or stored in some place. And using that phone, I'm able to shut down all the lights, or I'm able to capture using some way or the other, I'm able to capture and I'm able to control the lights. This is a broken object which has been compromised. The moment an object has been compromised, also the function to that API, like a get, post, put, post, patch, delete, update functions can also get compromised, which goes back to a role-based access control, right? So these are security vulnerabilities which we are talking about, or APIs which can get vulnerable. We also maintain checksums every API. So whenever you publish your APIs, you do give a checksum so that the other party can validate whether the API download is a fake API or a proper API, or is it something which is, it's a genuine API. So we need to do that. Some of the SBOM pillars, we are talking about compliance. We all know compliance is important. You have DPD Act. RBI also come out with a circular in 2018. SEBI has also come out with a circular in India. We got SOX compliance, HIPAA compliance. Everybody says your data should not get leaked. Your application is not leaking the data. The data is being leaked by your API. Why? You may have enforced a weak authentication method or authorization method, which means goes back to one step before. Role-based access control, admin, all functions. Manager, no post function, right? User, only get function. Now, if I'm able to manipulate a token, like we were discussing an OER token, or tokens have been compromised, and I'm able to use the same token for the admin into a user, I've been able to capture the token, and I've been able to use it for the user with the same credentials, with the username and password being mine as a guest, and I'm able to compromise and get all the lights down. It means I have broken or weakened, you've got a weak authentication authorization method implemented in your application. It doesn't go to your application, it goes back to an API. So this is why we are talking about an API compliance. So what happens? You get compromised, you have legal issues, right? Apart from that, your organization's name could go, you could face legal and financial crunches in terms. We're also looking at security and risk management. API security globally is no longer the ownership of your security guys or the developers. It's now the board members. Globally, wherever we are speaking to domestically, we have folks in MR, we've got, Singapore government and all these guys. All of them have put API security as a part of the board management. It's the chief risk officer, the CEO, they are all involved in taking conscious calls on your API security, right? That's an important thing. We're looking at visibility. Now, this is a very important thing because 99% of the people who are walking across here are asking this question. I would like to have an inventory of my entire APIs within my application. There are two problem statements. One is, I have an application, I have a gateway, I have a Kong, I may have an IBM, I may have a, Google, blah, blah, blah. They will only give you whatever is being asked for whenever people outside request you for information, right? More important is, you may get not the 100% inventory, you may get a 60, 70%. Till the time people do not hit that API, you will not get access. Kong is not going to respond. Your gateways are not going to respond. Do we agree or disagree? That's the way it has been designed for, right? Gateways are only supposed to help you to, it's a business proposition to help you to monetize your APIs when you're selling them in the market or to manage your APIs. So we need to look in the entire central catalog. What are we going to build? What are the versions? What are dependencies which we are building? One API could be having multiple dependencies, so it goes into a dependency chart. We'll come to that a little later. We're also looking at posture improvement, which is there. I'll give you a life story. The real reason our API security came into place, we had a product. The same story which I told you about a little while ago for the bank, right, was our problem statement in 2019. We created Infosys, a cyber incident management, typically aimed for certs and CSerts. We got global certs using it. The challenge was, there were two people in security. We were a small team of 25 people. I'm talking about 2019. Me and Vaishnu is on our booth. And every time we had the problem statement, how many APIs? We would discover 170 APIs. Our developer will say 60 APIs, right? The challenge, right? So we decided, we looked at all the global tools available in the market to find out how do we create an inventory, how do we create a testing. We could not find out any methods of doing it. So that's how we started creating the product to solve our problem first. Right? So this is important because of the fact that we wanted to integrate this. We were using Eclipse. We wanted to integrate right early in the stage of development so that we have a QA guys, the dev guys, we had people using Selenium, etc., etc. We wanted to integrate into the DevOps process, or basically I would say DevSecOps. I mean, I promote DevSecOps more than DevOps. And we're looking at operational resiliency because of the fact that we are able to respond faster. If we are able to know how our APIs are figured, if they have been compromised, we can respond quicker and better in terms of getting our products online. ZTNA, everybody talks about it. And typically the first thing about a ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Architecture, is your API secure? If you scroll down, very fine thin lines, everybody talks about it. I was having this discussion with Vishal. Vishal Salvi is ex-Infosys. Before that, he was in, I think, Ernst & Young, forgotten. Yeah. Now he has moved into, yeah. So we used to have the discussion, and he was talking about ZTNA, and we were talking to Infosys. And we were saying, we help in ZTNA in terms of ensuring your APIs are secure, because that's the first line of defense. That's where the entry into your organization application comes into place. Some of the core, I would say, SBOM standards, we are talking about, I'm sure most of you should know about it. This is SPDX, or basically Cyclone DX, which has been there for quite a number of times. It's one of the traditional ways where we generate an SBOM, where it's software bill of material. Then we have SWID. Cyclone DX is trying to get into the API SBOM space in trying to create an inventory, but there's no specific standard as we talk about. Then we've got SID or SWID or software identification tags. And then we got the SPDX exchange. Couple of companies, I can name them. Cyclone DX was being used by Sonatype. SPDX was being used by Black Duck. Both of us are my ex-companies, so I know about them, pretty sure about them, right? And we're looking at some of the API-specific standards. I'm sure everybody is, how many people are here using RESTful APIs? Majority, right? That is most commonly used. 98% of the market uses REST, right? 2% of the market, you got, I would say 96% uses REST, 2 to 3% uses more like SOAP, right? Or 2.5 to 3%, 1% uses GraphQL, and the remaining 1%, a couple of big names, right, are still on JSON RPC and XML RPC. There's still a bunch. Bunch means not more than 3 or 4 people. So we're looking at OpenAPI, which is Swagger. We're looking at async. I think we had a discussion with async, and the lady is talking about async on the other forum right now. We're looking at GraphQL, another one which is being used, promoted by another big company. Names, of course, you all know, typically. Now, some of the emerging concepts, we're talking about a dependency graph. It's important to know what all APIs are being consumed within an application. So you need to know exactly the dependency. So if you know the dependency, you know exactly when you want to do an RCA to figure out where exactly your product has gone wrong. It'll be important to have an RCA of your dependency graph so that you can point out rather than looking into it. It's like a microservice, right? In your microservice, you may call a bunch of maybe tens of APIs in the same time, right, for a certain function, right? You may have a function which is for, let's say, for example, pushing some data with relevance to a country, right, or something to do with a city or with a mobile number. You may have separate APIs for doing that job because you want your APIs to be very efficient, right? You may have done data shredding in terms of shredding your database into multiple locations so that you have a quicker response to clients, because some of our clients tell we are looking at something like 8 million per day, right, responses, IOCs or incidents of, right. So for such high responses, you need to have very fine-tuned APIs, right? So you need to have a dependency. We need to generate a runtime API SBOM, which is you integrate with, I would say, gateways, you integrate with other tools, technologies, so that you have a real-time API SBOM. Then we're looking at the security posture enhancement, wherein if we are coming out of the vulnerability, the biggest challenge which, if any of you are security guys, you are going to face is that developers, I call my team in developers as gods, right? And then we come as mortals. So the moment we go as security guys and tell them there's a security vulnerability in your API, he says, this is the best API in the world. And then we have to show them exactly the request and the response data and emulate that in a manual fashion to be convincing them that this vulnerability does exist. I'm sure everybody would resonate with that in case you are from the security guys, right? And developers will realize the problem statements we face as security professionals when we talk about APIs. We're talking about cross-organization APIs. So whenever you're using APIs, we're also looking at CI/CD integrations. Zero trust is important, and I'm just coming on to this. Version drift detection. You need to understand this is a very important feature. Why? Because you may have a version 1.10a in your QA. It doesn't go into your dev because it's a different versioning out there. But you move it in your external version control. That causes a lot of problems. We've seen internally also. We've asked when we speak to prospects or we're talking to people. That's a problem we've seen them happening. And of course, we all know about the various acts coming into the market for security. We're talking about in India, globally, GDPR compliance, etc. So we have all those issues in terms of data protection coming into place. I'll quickly, already short in time, I'll just take another 2 minutes. So some of the, I'm just going to publish it. I'm not going to look at the slides. So what are the basic fundamental benefits we get of creating an API SBOM? I have a ready inventory of everything which is being consumed within my application, right? I have an inventory of ensuring what are my vulnerabilities which are prevalent in my application so I can fix them up. I know exactly what is the request data which has been sent to the API under test and what is the response received. It's a 200, doesn't mean a 200 is always okay. 200 could mean that API is vulnerable, right? We're looking at a faster incident response because we can fill in this information back into an SIM so that it goes back into the system. We have, you've got to have a Jira integration. So it goes back to the developers to fix it up quickly. And yes, risk and governance. Some of the challenges we always face, there's no standardization like I shared a couple of slides earlier. There's no standard documentation where it says SPDX or you've got to use this particular format, right? We are pushing across domestically within the country. We are trying to get into global forums to push this as an API SBOM. Tooling is very important. A lot of toolings are missing across in the API security market when we talk about it. And 99% of the problem statement is security professionals do not understand or cannot make out the difference between a REST API or a web URL or GraphQL. They have to be told. I'm a security guy, I'm telling you that openly. 99% of the developers sitting in this room, if I ask them a simple question, I just give you a URL and tell me whether it's an API or a web URL, they will say, I need a postman. I'm not wrong. I mean, I see that in my own organization. So when we interview people, we just ask them, here's a web URL, tell me, just looking at it and printing on your browser, it's an API or a URL. They have no answers. And why is it a URL? They don't have answers, right? So these are very basic fundamental questions when we're talking about organizational readiness, in terms of security. Quick about us, we talk about making security simple, and whatever we design in our organization, we spend a lot of time on UI UX. I spent a couple of years in a mobile company with BK Modi. company called Spice Telecom, right? So first thing was click to action, and BK always wanted click to action to be 1, which means when one click, the guy should be able to consume a product. So that's a philosophy I'm driving inside my organization is, can I have a click to action within 1 or 2 clicks, as minimal as possible for people to consume a product. We have 4 products, just to give you an idea. We have our API fuzzer. We have got something called cyber resilience or cybersecurity. Again, this came out of a requirement internally because when we were hiring security professionals, we wanted to test them out, we wanted to train them out, and it was very difficult and costly. So we created our own virtualization, which is on OpenStack, which is a data center architecture on a cyber range, which is there. Just to share with you, we did an exercise, not an exercise, training with BITS Pilani and CERT, which was an 8-week course on cybersecurity, which was there, right, which is on our cyber platform. Then we got a cyber training, which is Crisis Sim. I was talking to folks in NatWest, what happens if there's a phishing or malware attack, right? You got to train your professionals from a CXO down to the last guy who's involved into the activity to figure out if they are ready for a crisis, which could happen. And last we have is our Intrasys, which is an incident management system aimed only for certs. We're 120, exactly 120. We got 4 products. We already got 3 more products coming out of our, from our, you can say, our software factory in the next, I think we have one in Q2 26 and Q3 26. So we got a couple of them coming out only aimed at cybersecurity. Any questions? More than happy to answer. We are there at one of the booths in case you want to have it in the interest of time.
Yeah. We've got about 5 minutes for some questions. Anybody?
Thank you, Mohit. Just one quick thing. So APISBOM, is that another product or how is it like it was not being
Yeah, so API fuzzer of our product takes into account the APISBOM.
Okay, okay.
So this product will also down the line integrate with SBOM, where this will be a separate entity, and we are coming out with a new product. We are calling it as FLOM, which is going to be an API SBOM, which is going to be SBOM, which is going to be mobile SBOM, because banks like yours would like to have a mobile SBOM, right? And we're also coming out with AI SBOM and network SBOM.
Okay, and the CI/CD pipeline, other factors to mention, is it still in progress work?
No, it's already there.
Already there.
It's already there. We already have a lot of integrations because of the fact that we consume it internally. So all those products get tested using our API security before they go to market.
Okay, great, great. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah. Any more questions? Maybe just time for one more if there is.
So usually while finding security vulnerabilities, right, technical vulnerabilities are easy to find. We can first using single quote, double quote to identify basic SQL injection, XSS related stuff, right? But what about business logic?
Yeah, I was waiting for somebody to ask this question. Very standard question. You know, we had one of our use cases. I won't take the name, and one of the use cases they had was typically where a session was being hijacked, right? Now what happens in a session hijacking is you got a let's say a cinema portal, right? And you got all the tickets available for the new movie just being released. And suddenly when you come out of 3 minutes, everything is sold out and you've got somebody selling it in black. Just to give you an example. That's hijacking this entire session because they block everything out here, right? That's a business, right? Now the challenge that prospect was facing or the client was facing was the fact that their security team was not able to test this out. So for us, we have one of our security engineers here only, he was a part of the research team. We wrote, for us it was a part of our existing product. So we do cover more than, I would say 60% of the generic business logic vulnerabilities. I'll give you a simple example. Password retry counter is a business vulnerability or security? Business, right? How do you design the password? 8, 16, 24 characters, business, right? Whether you use an HTTP versus an HTTPS function is a business requirement, right? If you're using a weak encryption or a TLS, it's a business, right? So we do cover more than 60 to 70% business requirements. For specific requirements like the ones you have as specific to your requirements, we have a client, I can't take the name. We deputed our team to be at the client location for around 6 to 8 weeks, understood the requirements and made a small module for them. We don't own, the best thing what we do is, if it's a very business which is critical to you, it's not relevant to everybody in the market. So we don't make that as a part of our product. So we give it specifically go back and every time there's an update, we work on your update too. So it's a very tricky question because 99% of the organizations will not have. We are also coming out very shortly with, to answer your questions, we have identified 4 domains where we will have test cases based on those domains, which will cover more than 80-85% of those domains. So we have a research team right now working. Only job is work on those guys, understand how they work, and get into account what are the business logic vulnerabilities they would like to, address to. So we're talking about, let's say, top 10 banks. So we get a lot of information from there. Or let's say the top 10 e-commerce companies, right? So we're looking at industry specific, and we are going to say, you are in industry, you can just click and test. At least you'll get 80% there. Right now you're 0 or maybe 30. But with our solutions, you can easily achieve 80%. That's what we are pushing for API SBOM to be coming.
Sure, thank you.
Sorry? Everybody is working. Everybody says we're working. So you have SPDX working on it on API SBOM, but it's still not there. We've been working on it since 2021, and we decided to take it as a product, introduce into our product somewhere in this year.
Awesome. Okay, and that's a wrap. Thanks, Mohit.
Thank you.
Let's give him a big hand. Thank you.